Frank Fritz became more than just a collector. He became a man with a passion, a sharp eye for treasures, and a life packed with surprising twists. From his upward push to re-pupe on American pickers to his struggles backstage, his journey was anything but ordinary. He battled infection, heartbreak, and personal demons, all at the same time as preserving a smile on his face for the cameras. But what actually happened in his final years be part of us as we uncover how Mike Wolfe finally broke the seal on Frank Fritz, and why it's terrible, the journey of Frank Fritz after Frank's loss of life. Every person became awaiting his longtime friend from the show. They ran together to speak, although at one point they had disagreements. Mike Wolfe finally broke his silence on Frank Fritz, and it's bad, but we cannot communicate approximately the end of lifestyles and the legacy that Frank left without seeing what he added to this international Frank. Fritz's journey wasn't just about amassing antiques. It became about seeing records where others saw junk. From a young age, he had an eye for the forgotten and the discarded, a talent that would subsequently make him a household name, but before he ever set foot on TV, earlier than the repute and the fans he turned into, only a child with a passion for amassing Frank, turned into born on October 11th, 1963, in Davenport, Iowa, a small town with deep American roots. He wasn't like most youngsters his age. While others were busy with sports activities or video games, Frank changed into looking for hidden treasures. His fascination with items started out early. Coins, stamps, beer cans, old razor blades. If it had a story, Frank wanted to comprehend it, believe. Being a younger boy and entering into an vintage shop in which the air smells of elderly paper and polished wood, the ticking of grandfather clocks fills the silence. Most kids would possibly get bored. However, now not Frank, he turned into captivated. Each item had a past, a thriller ready to be solved. Who had held this pocket watch? What tales may want to an old signal? Tell the past wasn't just something in history books, it'd become in his fingers as he got older. Frank's interest grew, his small collectibles become something bigger, bikes, dust bikes, rare memorabilia. He spent weekends at flea market storage sales and estate auctions, constantly at the hunt many people would possibly have idea. He turned into just a child with an unusual interest, but to Frank it was something extra. It was an attempt at a side journey. But here's where his tale takes a surprising turn. You'll think that with his love for antiques, he might leap instantly into the commercial enterprise rather. After high school, Frank took a very different route, one which had nothing to do with amassing for nearly 25 years. He worked as a hearth inspector in Iowa, a stable task and a regular paycheck, but deep down he never stopped being a collector at first glance. Being a fire inspector had nothing to do with accumulating antiques, but in a manner it changed into the appropriate task for a person like Frank. He spent his days journeying old buildings, firehouses, and warehouses, lots of them packed with forgotten treasures. He started collecting firehouse memorabilia, helmets, extinguishers, antique fireplace alarms, and objects that instructed the records of the brave men who had used them. Step by step, Frank realized that his passion wasn't just an interest. The items he amassed had cost, no longer just sentimental, but financial. What if he should flip his love for history into something bigger? What if he should try this full time? It is now not clean to stroll far away from a solid profession. However, Frank took the thread. He opened his very own vintage store, Frank's Fins, that specialize in fireman's equipment and other rare collectibles. It turned into a small step, but an essential one. He turned into not just a collector, he became a businessman, turning his ardor right into a profession. Frank Fritz and Mike Wolfe of Direction Frank Fritz will constantly be remembered for American pickers. The show turned him into a household call, a face identified by way of fanatics of antiques, treasures searching all over the country. However, Frank's story wasn't pretty, much rusty bikes and vintage symptoms. It changed into approximately friendship, passion, and in the long run, a heartbreaking fallout. At the coronary heart of American pickers became the dynamic between Frank and Mike Wolfe, two men who spent over a decade visiting the roads of America looking for hidden gemstones. But earlier than the fame, before the digital camera started out rolling, they had been simply two kids from Iowa who shared a love for gathering. Their journey collectively turned into, filled with laughter, success, and eventually betrayal. So how did a friendship that seemed so robust absolutely fall apart, as we already stated? Frank Fritz became born on October 1196 in Davenport, Iowa, while Mike Wolfe turned into born a little over a year later in Joel, Illinois. They grew up in the identical metropolis of Bondorf, Iowa, and primary crossed paths in Center College. But were they adolescents excellent friends? Not precisely. In fact, they didn't grow in particular. Close till later in existence, Frank and Mike weren't inseparable pals from the beginning. Their paths ran parallel, but it wasn't until their shared passion for antiques brought them together that they honestly shaped a bond. Mike turned into, usually, the large dreamer, the fellow with a imaginative and prescient he-saw capability where others saw nothing. He did not simply need to collect antiques. He wanted to show. Diane, he sold them a lovely domestic in Iowa, an costly engagement ring, and began dreaming in their future collectively. But love stories don't always have satisfied endings. In 2018, the whole lot fell apart, according to Diane. She caught Frank in mattress with another girl. Internal, their farmhouse. The betrayal shattered their courting. She called off the engagement, and their love story was a bitter public feud. But Frank had his own model of activities. He claimed she had been the only who turned into untrue, secretly seeing every other man in the back of his. Returned for over 2 years, the accusations flew from both sides, each blaming the alternative for the disintegrate in their dating. The ache reduced deep, and Frank made certain he might by no means forget about it. He were given a tattoo that read, "Once a cheater, always a cheater," as an everlasting reminder of the betrayal he felt aught to their dating had been stored. Could they've worked through their troubles? Maybe. However, as opposed to locating a way ahead, things simplest got worse. Simply whilst it appeared like they'd long gone their separate methods, Diane hit Frank with a lawsuit in 2020. She accused him of negligence, claiming that he were reckless with fireworks in keeping with her. He improperly disposed of a firework in an ashtray, which later exploded, causing excessive burns on her palms and hands. She suffered 0.33-degree burns, lost her eyelashes and eyebrows, and stated that Frank refused to take her to the sanatorium. Alternatively, he allegedly told her to give a boost to up the lawsuit made headlines. However, only a few months later, Diane disregarded the case. Still, the damage changed into performed Frank and Diane's love story, which had lasted for many years, had led to court cases, accusations, and public bitterness after their split. Frank offered their Iowa mansion in 2021 and moved on, the first class he ought to. Diane additionally moved ahead together with her lifestyles, saying in 2022 that she had observed love once more with a person new as a ways, as every person is aware of. Frank and Diane by no means spoke again earlier than his dying. Their story, once full of love and hope, was a painful reminiscence. Frank Fritz's dying very soon after that, it had become clean that Frank Fritz's fight turned into coming to and give up his body, already weakened by means of years of contamination, dependency, and heartbreak, could now not maintain. Going by September 2024, his situation had worsened, and medical doctors knew there was not anything extra they could do when the call came that Frank did not have a great deal time left. Mike Wolfe didn't hesitate. He dropped everything and rushed to Frank's aspect. The beyond failed to be counted anymore. The fights, the years of silence, the matters left unsaid, none of it became important. Now all that mattered became being there. Frank was in, on my own. In his final moments, his mother became there. A near family friend turned into by means of his side, and Mike, his old friend and picking accomplice, sat beside him, keeping his hand. The room became quiet. No. 1840, cameras, no bright lighting, no television scripts, only some. Those who loved Frank ready with him as he took his final breaths. Mike later found out that as Frank's breathing slowed, he leaned in and whispered to him. He informed him he loved him, he instructed him, he forgave him, he advised him. The whole lot changed into K after the entirety. The reputation, the feuds, the struggles. Frank left this global no longer. As a Truth TV celebrity, now not as a celeb, but as a person surrounded by folks who cared approximately him. Frank's respectable reason of death became listed as overdue sequela of cerebral infarction, in simpler terms. Headaches from his large stroke in 2022 had ultimately taken their toll. his frame were combating for 2 years. However, the harm became too splendid. He also suffered from aortic stenosis, a situation that restricts blood go with the flow from the coronary heart. For Frank, even the simplest duties on foot respiration, standing had become hard. Each day had been a war. His body slowly giving up peace by using peace. In the end, it wasn't one single issue that took Frank's lifestyles. It had become the load of the entirety. The battles he had fought for "see you later" had subsequently caught up with him while news of Frank's passing unfold. Lovers mourned he were extra than only a guy on television. He turned into real, relatable he, become the buddy you'll want on a avenue journey. The man who should make you chuckle even in the center of a junkyard. He had spent his lifestyles trying to find misplaced treasures, but in the long run the greatest treasures were not the antiques he found. It became the friendships he made, the humans he related with, and the memories he left at the back of Mike Wolfe sooner or later breaks silence for the reason that Mike Wolfe have been by way of Frank Fritz facet in his final years. It's no wonder that he is aware of extra approximately his overdue buddy than anybody else. But recently Mike Wolfe ultimately broke the silence on Frank Fritz, and it's awful. In a unprecedented and emotional interview, Mike spoke approximately Frank in a way that no person had earlier than he admitted that Frank had been an amazing guy, but he had made one vital mistake, one that may have fee him everything. Frank wasn't ideal, but he only ever certainly tousled as soon as, and that became, with Dion Mike, stated then came the surprising phrases, "he killed her." The moment he offered that residence, Mike wasn't speaking about homicide in a literal feel. He meant that when Frank determined to permit cross of the house he had constructed along with his former fiancée, he additionally let pass of his risk at happiness as opposed to combating for his relationship in preference to taking duty and having an honest communique. Frank walked away, and in doing so he misplaced more than just a residence. He misplaced the one individual who might have been there for him, whilst the whole lot commenced to crumble. Consistent with Mike, Diane had wanted extra than whatever to attempt again, to give their love some other shot, but that in no way passed off, and maybe simply perhaps if she had been there, Frank wouldn't have faced his battles on my own. Perhaps he might nonetheless be alive nowadays. That changed into his real mistake. Mike admitted now, not his health, no longer his struggles, but letting her pass. Do you consider in second probabilities in love can misplaced relationships ever in reality be repaired? Let us recognize within the remarks and join our channel for more.